All right, we're live. And thanks, YouTube, everybody. Thanks for joining. Today we're going over the meteorological line processes, and I'm hearing my own echo. Just a second. There you go. Why does it launch live and immediately play the YouTube live? Um, with that, well, I do have that option, right? If you want me to just go ahead and move the book myself, yeah, because that should only give me access to your PDF. Okay. So I think this is part I might need some help from you guys because I was still thinking about this very concretely and not in the abstract sense I meant to go back through, but never to re-review, never did. So I guess I'll read 286. The individual identity which binds together different elements, as well as their difference from one another and from their unity, is dialectic, which constitutes the physical life of the earth, the meteorological process. It is in this process alone that the elements as subordinate moments have their existence, being generated in it and posited as existent, after first being developed out of the in itself as moments of the notion. I believe at this point, this is more talking about kind of the conversions between the different elements in whatever form they take, which meteorology is like the most obvious, the most easiest to observe form of that, which is why he brings in the example of rain a lot, because, water sublimating, evaporating and then condensing back out. Um, yeah, I think the part,
Sorry, I was muted.
that's fine. I remember some of the like I said, more abstract
Did
arguments.
you
Go
did
ahead.
This is probably a stupid question to ask you, but have you ever watched Captain Planet?
Yeah, that
Okay.
good.
You remember how they had the I mean they had something similar. They had like a thing with a glowing thing on it, right? We're talking about Saturday morning cartoons, Jim. And they had I like a stone in a tablet that they each had, and one was earth and air and fire and water and
Yeah,
heart,
right.
right? And you had like physically existent things in their hands that they call these things. And what Hegel is referring to here with the process of the elements is that those elements don't have existence apart from each other, apart from this process.
Yeah,
Within this individual identity, you can't separate them and have them be what they are. They are as as moments or as elements of this process, and just like in capital, like money shifts into commodities, shifts into stock, shifts into it's kind of the same thing, right? If you separated it off, it would just be this dollar bill in your hand, right? But as part of the process, it's this morphing fluid substance we call elements in this case.
which which is why I feel like, at least in part way, as a pictorial representation, it is better to, for at least for most modern people, more of our take these more as the phase, although not completely, because there's still further aspects that air, water, and earth take here than the mere phases. Like is dynamic and ethereal. Air is just more the principle of expansion and kind of equalness.
Hmm.
Water is fluid and adaptable, and Earth is solid, which he refers to a lot in this section as crystal. I mean, that's implying further forward, and I'm kind of curious what crystal is going to give us versus what we know crystals specifically to be today. A rock in a way can be considered even an amorphous crystal, not including a pure crystal or something. So yeah, like it's a
I had the same question where crystal was concerned, like these are thought objects, and so when he says, this is the crystal of something, I'm assuming that it is like an older scientific term of how to like think about something in the abstract that's concrete, but you're trying to like um
It's like
you're
it's
trying to give
hard.
it an analog, I guess you could say.
I feel like it's hard at that point. It's not like
Yeah,
a we're solid. It's really solid. That's how I took it.
right. I might have been wrong. I'd have to look at where it said crystal because I didn't understand it myself at the time fully.
Yeah, I'm trying to think at this point. There's beforehand. It's getting a little bit of delay. That's what it is. Concrete mode of activity. Let me just look at mine right quick because I feel like that's probably the better option. In general, we have the applications of category. Well, oh no, that's highlighted. It's fine. In general, we have the application of categories from a sphere of finite relationships to a sphere which such relationships are infinite. That is where they confirm the notion, which, in this at the point where the universe, where the understanding is applying these finite concepts of things to the infinite relationship that each of these forms has with one another, right?
Hmm.
So this leads to certain like then of trying to take things in one perspective only to describe a process sort of thing, which
That's exactly what he's saying here.
nice.
He's trying to elaborate exactly what we were just talking about. Like, um,
And we get the matters and the stuff that
oh, water is solidified into in a crystal. So like, so think of like the crystal lattice of ice as a solid.
is
Like it has a certain molecular
yeah,
structure as ice, I guess you could say. And that's
yeah.
what he meant here. Okay.
Yeah, I think about it later too. Not in this specific context either.
Yeah.
But yeah. Um, and then he goes through examples here that shows trying to understand how rain worked in his time, because in the
Yeah.
time they never figured they couldn't didn't figure it out yet. They had some ideas, but yeah, go ahead. But they but I'm thinking about today's process. I'm a little curious still on how some of this thought. So this section, and again, he's talking about taking things in the purple sphere and trying to like nail the hammer of rain with whatever sphere they're in. So as a purely mechanistic viewpoint, which is all the way, I believe, on 116. So the next page.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, electricity. Yeah, here's the point you're talking about. He didn't agree. Lightning, for instance, is held to be the spark of electrical discharge produced by friction among the clouds. But the skies, there's no glass, no thin wax, no resin, etc. Electricity is a scapegoat which must do service anywhere, but it's a familiar fact that electricity is completely dispelled by moisture, whereas lightning originates in quite moist air. Yeah, this is where the understanding of what rain was. I use lowercase u wasn't quite right because the modern theory of lightning is still the same constant thing. It is, in fact, the rubbing, but the rubbing of ice crystals that dispels the charge. And
Hmm.
of course, at this time, it wasn't known that moisture doesn't dispel electricity. It just makes the necessary voltage to bridge that gap through the air immensely higher, which is why lightning is so strong. And of course, also the distance, but
Yeah.
so yeah, he's right at this point that it was made to scapegoat without it was pointed to without necessarily being a valid reason for it yet, even though they were in the end correct, which we definitely find around Hegel here. That's part I didn't. Oh, yeah. At this point, yeah, that was. Oh, transmutation, right? Because at this point, water is transmuted into air. They didn't understand where it came from. So the mechanistic determination he has from here is that is this again is a true fact that water vapor is less has less specific weight, so you can think of it as density than dry air. But again, they didn't have a mechanism of why that would be the case, so it's really hard at this time for them to determine. And what is it down here too, where he talks about the highest mountains, they have rain even though it's dry air. There was no yet conception of whether the at the point at which water, precipitates out the air is dependent on the temperature because the density of the air is important at that point. But again, without explanation of understanding why that worked, it was just that the particles just sort of filled up the air without any change to the air itself otherwise. And so it just sort of divides apart and then recombines without really any reason, which I thought was interesting, which didn't yet explain why water seems to come out of dry air or in unusual locations. Air, therefore, is not only dry through external removal. It might be that water vapor account of elasticity would rise. Yeah, that moist air would rise higher than dry air without the understanding of Brownian motion and all this. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's the you're jumping from okay, that's what it is. You're jumping from here to there, even though you have the abstract set correct. You don't have the necessary process to describe that. So yet again, calling out the ambiguities that are yet to be explained. Okay. And this one, I still need to understand this older conception of where water comes from because they did think hydrogen was the main thing that made water water, not the oxygen molecule. But that is where the names come from in their relationship to water.
Ah, yes. Hydro.
Yeah, hydro, and I forgot why oxygen is oxy in this case, but it's like the other of water. And so he explains some processes again that does where they were able to like use electrolysis on water, where one side generate hydrogen, the other side generate oxygen. Can't explain then why hydrogen and oxygen. Yet again, I think what was it? Chemistry is trying to make the nature of water purely in its chemical nature, even though
Yeah.
as we know it's both at the same time. Because it's the chemical nature that leads it to freeze in a crystal form, but still water vapor in the air is purely mechanistic because it evaporates and eventually its molecule itself rises. And in here, just trying to say there's no relationship between the hydrogen and the oxygen gas that you can connect with water. So how can you say it's composite? Like this is where they're still thinking of it as a composite nature,
Hmm.
where they come together rather than literally the chemical connection completely can change the qualities of the substance. Because what is it? Sodium sodium is a powerful like is explosive metal because if it combines with water, it explodes. Chlorine gas is very dangerous, but then when combined, it's table salt. So again, where it's a mere conception of if water were such a mere compositum, it would always necessarily be separable into these parts. Okay,
Yeah,
I think that would be good.
I think there's the issue of virgin properties versus composite properties,
Yeah, I think this at the time where they didn't have the understanding of those yet. So
which actually would, the idea of emergent properties would fit Hegel's analysis quite well, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I was thinking on that. There's a version of general emergent properties in a dialectical sense, where the former just sort of they kind of just shows up, while dialectical does have the necessity built in.
This is on
Ooh, that I didn't do that this time. That makes me feel good.
Sorry.
Fine, I've done that. That's what I was saying. And then also combining it to heat, where heat somehow, yeah, the concept of heat, where it's just sort of it's there until it moves. Like I think that's where heat was a substance at the time. So yeah, a whole bunch of old stuff. Oh, did I trigger that? All right. Figured this point if we want to pause and talk about anything on that.
Oh, on
Yeah, I don't kind of ramble a
the
little bit. But it's like,
on the processes
yeah,
involved. Yeah, he from what I can tell here, the main point that he's trying to get across is that there is a way to posit in thought these processes that are going on, but he cannot quite fully map them onto the actual concrete processes because the science is still out on how some of them work, and so he just sort of has to do the best he can. Um, and so the main point for us is being able to extract the necessary logical structure of thought dealing with it, which is not necessarily going to be affected by uh, changing science. Changing science, if anything, will map better onto his uh, his
yeah,
categories, I think.
yeah. I think it just sort of helped me process what he was trying to say there, which is yeah, that it's trying to connect it to the thought, and of course, his critique of certain conceptions aren't necessarily evidence of him denying the science.
Yeah. Yeah.
As is so infamous in here for him allegedly being anti-evolution. Actually, if he didn't care so much about it, why would he, critique it in such proper ways?
Yeah. The answer, of course, is he did care about it, and he,
Yeah.
is trying to make it make sense. I guess you could say.
All right. I guess we want to follow process. Hey, Matt, do you want to read 287?
Yeah. Yeah, I got it. Sorry, I'm just all over the place. 287. The process of the earth is perpetually kindled and stimulated by its universal self, the activity of light, its primary relationship to the sun, and it is then further particularized according to the position of the earth in relation to the sun, climate, seasons, etc. One moment of this process is the diremption of individual identity, the development of the moments of the self-subsistent opposition into a tension between them as embodying rigidity and selfless neutrality. Through this tension, first, the Earth is on the way to resolving itself into a crystalline form, into a moon on the one hand, and into a fluid body that is a comet on the other. And secondly, the moments of the individuality seek to realize their connection with their self-subsistent roots. So here he's describing the logical process or the logical necessity in thought of taking all of these elements that are in process and applying them to the earth. The earth is what actually generates the process, which includes these moments, and embodies not only their unity but their difference in their process as they morph one element into another, into another, into another, depending on where you are, and just sort of harkening back to the earlier thought elements that were the moon and the comet, which of course make up what the Earth is through these processes.
Yeah. Here again, here's an example of crystalline not meaning like crystal in that sense, but more like a solidification of,
Yes.
which to me he talks of me saying it's both solidifying into a moon and comet just means it's sort of almost like it's a precipitate in a way. It's sort of it's coming out of the abstract into the concrete. That's how I feel like it kind of like using it here in some sense. It's something
Well,
becoming more solid, more what it is.
what it is already exists,
Well,
but to
for
be
us,
able,
yeah,
to talk about those different elements as both separate from each other as well as in one unity, uh, requires this form, I think, just with any other part of Hegel's system, is that dealing with the parts and the whole.
I
Um,
misidentified what he's referring to. Crystalline form is pointing to the moon, so it's like it is it's all. It just means solid in this sense. So
yes,
okay,
I agree. I agree. You're
yeah,
right. Yeah.
yeah. I'd be kind of interested in trying to kind of picture his example of light here from being a more concrete viewpoint because it does, you know, heat the earth, keep it warm and such. So versus
Well,
abstract form back when we start first presented it.
well,
It's
if you look at the Zusatz, he kind of gives you a taste of what he's trying to do in 287, which is that. So
yeah,
first we looked at light as this sort of abstract, posited, um, universal principle, and now we're looking at light as it affects the earth and sets off processes in it, which we couldn't associate with it yet before considering the planetary, the lunar, and the cometary bodies and what they're made up of. And so there are all these elements that he's sort of like previously considered as separate moments, and now we see them in process, all working together. And light, at this stage in the dialectic, cannot be considered as simply abstract and on its own, because obviously it's a whole mix of what it does and what it sets off and all these other things, and how it's this dialectical mixture versus these separate things all siloed off from each other.
okay. So the more precise manner in which this effect appears to be considered. Let's
Sorry.
back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, there you go. Nope.
Oh, right here.
Yeah, the more precise manner in which this effect appears is to be considered in two aspects. While alteration is simply a change of state, which would be mechanical, and the other qualitative alteration in the actual process would be more chemical. So
Yeah.
yeah, we do have both at the same time. The first one is talking about the incidence of light from both distance and the in our angle and of our rotation. So like the cause of the seasons, basically, is the mere change of state that we do with light with respect to the sun. The second one, I mean, we all understand how that works. I don't think we need to describe that at this point because we're all learned that in school, thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now the essential point, the one he points as the more critical, I guess, the chemical would be the qualitative alteration, the tension within the Earth itself and between the Earth and the atmosphere. The alternation between lunar and cometary moments. Oh, talking about change of process. So cloud formation is not merely just evaporation, but has striving of the Earth toward one extreme. Cloud formation is a play of reduction of the air to neutrality. Well, because it's water. I'm assuming he means they're more fluid. So it's swinging the air toward one play of the air toward neutrality. Yeah, because the water starts condensing around the nucleus. But the clouds can form without actually raining. So the true disappearance of water is not merely privative determination, but conflict within water itself. An impulse and urge toward the consuming element of fire. So because clouds, I guess, build, so they're not and fall apart, they're not static, like water being neutral. Okay.
Yeah.
Heat and cold are accessory states which do not belong to the determination process itself, and so exert an accidental influence, as in the formation of hail. Houghton code does affect the flow of the air itself. And yeah, hail is probably like the maximum example of that. Okay, yeah. I
Yeah.
also want to go to hails like because it's a granular because it's initially a frozen drop of rain that comes in and out of like a core of rain. So like it goes in the cold rain and then it heats and then it moves out and then it as the outer layers of water evaporate, the water underneath it freezes to the hail and then it keeps going back and forth until it's too heavy to be kept aloft. Okay, yeah, that's very much accessory states in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here he's talking about, again, mercury back when it was literally used for measuring air pressure. Um,
We're trying to cure people from
yeah,
being too tired from work. And then of course it makes them more tired.
syphilis.
And they die. And then they die.
Yeah, syphilis too.
Jesus. Yeah, that's right. Oh,
Yeah, trying to specific gravity, I reinterpret it as density because it's the more accurate aspect of that's referring to. The greater pressure, which again shows the greater intensity or density of the air. Oh, he says it right there. Yes, the quantity of air has not increased. I depends what you mean by that, but sure, sure. That's another one of the things. It's relative to what aspect you're talking about.
hmm
The raised level in the air might be accounted for water absorbed by the air. No, but that wasn't known yet. But it's just when air is filled with mist or rain that specific gravity is diminished. It's just a thing when you add water to air because it's water has a smaller molecular weight than dry all the other dry air like oxygen, nitrogen. It actually makes it less dense because it's not because the volume of air is not being held in a container. If you were to add water in that way, yes, it would get much higher pressure. It just the atmosphere can carry moisture decomposed into its elements. Oh, it can decompose into its elements. Yeah, there we go. That's that. Yeah, the thing he does. The thing that's not that he's critiquing. Or permits the formation of water. Blah blah. When you can go into the next section. When Earth exercises power, increasing its force of attraction, it conquers the atmosphere and completely. Yeah, this all was a quote from Goethe, which I'm not that familiar with, which because I'm not, I guess I haven't done history meteorology. When there's it increasing its force of attraction, it conquers the atmosphere and completely appropriates its contents. Whatever arises in the atmosphere must come down as dew or hoarfrost.
Yeah.
Remains relatively clear. Just yeah, it condenses out. There's a contrast relationship between barometric level and winds. High mercury level indicates winds from the north and east, low level winds from the west and south. In the first case, moisture is cast onto the mountains, and the second, the mountains onto the lowlands. Yeah, that's high and low pressure.
hmm
At
Yeah.
that point, before it was, yeah, because high pressure creates drier conditions, lower pressure. Yeah, it's also kind of that makes, yeah, because it makes sense, especially because they're at the same. Actually, that's right. I was just looking. They know what Hadley cells were at this point too, which is just the three different layers, three different cell, like the planetary cell, basically of wind movement.
Yeah.
But yeah, just again, change of state, large part of the process of the four elements there. The other moment of the process that is the being for self torch. Actually, sorry, Jim, do you want to read 288?
The other moment of the process is that the being, the self, towards which the sides of the opposition strive, comes as negativity pushed to its extreme, self-subsisting. In other words, it becomes the self kindling destruction of the separate existence sought by the two sides. Through this process, the essential linkage of the sides is restored, and the earth has made itself into a real and uh, no,
Second.
second individuality.
Yeah, I think at this point, again, saying through the process of the changes, it becomes another one. The Earth itself becomes another one, which is an
Yeah.
individual. Which again, it's also similar processes in this, where he does compare like a thunderstorm to a volcano because it's a change of form that involves, going through multiple processes, such as, let me see here. Oh, and this is the point where still meteorology was still diverging itself from meteorites, which I think is now more the sphere of astronomy, anyways. Which, yeah, there's a reason meteorology is called meteorology because it considers everything in the sky. Yeah, physicists so far have been able to find a satisfactory explanation of the formation of rain or of thunder and lightning. Okay, so have their eruptions may be regarded as belonging to the process of fire in which rigidity passes over into the negativity of being for self set free. Such phenomena are, clouds, on the other hand, may be regarded as rudimentary comments, but the complete manifestation of the process is the thunderstorm to which the other meteorological phenomena attach themselves as rudiments, moments, or unripe realization. Right. This is yeah, again, his core critique for those, and I'm trying to understand why I'm not paging down. For these quite everyday phenomena, is it going? Yeah, you might have to do it, Matt, because it's not really.
Sorry, go ahead. What?
Okay, I was trying to scroll. Are we using the computer? Okay. For these quite, everyday phenomena, physics has not yet provided an explanation of which is at all satisfactory. It goes through. Yeah, again, I was just saying that again, that is Hegel's usual point throughout this whole thing. He
Yeah.
critiques science when it's not defining itself well yet, but here he combines, talks about a few different processes which kind of fulfill multiple different aspects of this process. Is itself, each aspect of these changes itself is a process of these, changes of state, which themselves are part of the terrestrial process. Where he especially likes here to compare like earthquakes and volcanoes, especially volcanoes, to that of thunderstorms, even though they come from uh, different states. Just the moment of self-destruction can be demonstrated also in the tensor itself. Enlightening the self-destruction achieves existence, this spontaneous ignition of the air, which is the extreme point of the tension, which then collapses. The moment of self-destruction can be demonstrated also in the tense earth itself. The earth makes itself, in returns like the organic bodies, it converts itself into the living activity of fire and likewise into the neutrality of water in volcanoes and springs. And so both the principles of volcanism and Neptunism, assumed in geology, are, of course, essential and belong to the process of the Earth's formation. Volcanoes therefore not to be understood as mechanical phenomena, but as subterranean thunderstorms with earthquakes. The thunderstorm, conversely, is a volcano in the clouds. Of course, needed for that to take place, but assumptions release have been, One sees, again, okay, combining earthquakes to animals being able to sense them ahead of time. I think we have a general understanding of how that happens today. Yeah, I think again the point there I was seeing where he says volcanoes therefore are not to be understood as mechanical phenomena, but as subterranean thunderstorms with earthquakes. The thunderstorm, conversely, is a volcano in the clouds. Again, it's a process of tension that leads to a change of state. Thunderstorms being, air into water, and you have the fire through its movement as process that leads to water, and then you got the volcano, which is earth that then through its tension breaks into liquid gas, into water, air, and even fire itself because it's magma super high and it flows. And of course, you're talking about barometric pressure. I guess we'll get more to in the next section, 293, because talked about example where Gulf compared barometric is a factor since the air either acquires or loses a great specific gravity with these atmospheric changes. Goethe compared barometric readings from the same latitudes and different meridians, and from these found that around the entire globe their variations are simultaneous. Well, I would say roughly that's just the prelude to being able to measure both change, atmospheric changes, especially the movement of storms. So yet again, everything is not static.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
Yeah. This is why I was more interested in geosciences beyond just weather.
Yeah, it's interesting to compare the Hegel's dialectics of nature with Engels, with 20th century, Marxist writers. I mean, a lot of the difference, it does come back to science had developed after Hegel's time.
Right.
And Engels did not have much use for the four elements, which Hegel made a lot of, whereas Hegel, makes a lot out of the four elements as a way for conceptualizing natural processes.
Right. It's both the change of states and kind of what qualities those different states embody in some form or another.
And also by Engels' time, it was possible to, to conceptualize, changes, like how changes in quantity relate to changes in quality, in terms of more advanced science of the late 19th century, which didn't really exist in Hegel's day yet. So what Hegel was trying to do, with the four elements, I think Engels thought you didn't really need that anymore, because Engels did read Hegel, and I think he had a very good understanding of Hegel.
Right.
I think he saw what Hegel was trying to do, but I mean, a lot of it was limited by the science of Hegel's day.
Yep. Of course, what I'm trying to do now is a similar thing, is find based off our science of today. Yeah, here's the part where, you know, shooting stars, talking about both that, where people didn't believe they were. In some sense, he's like comparing it to the air becoming solid, turning into its lunar form, just because it's rock coming out of the air, coming out of the sky. Not necessarily saying that it is air turning to rock, but that it's another phase change of something that you wouldn't expect.
Shit, sorry. Yeah, it's interesting too, because like the idea of like air turning into rock or rock turning into air, like when you think about it, the thought conception, the immediate thought conception that comes to you when you see these processes, right? Um, it really takes a lot of, for lack of a better word, essentializing to like see the whole process in your head, but as an immediate process, what this is what people conceptualize um, first before getting into the nitty gritty. Um, that's my thought.
Yeah. And he has some hint of metal here as it's but I'm trying to think about this last part. It's right. The meteorological process is the manifestation of this origin of individuality dominating the free qualities in their efforts at self-isolation and bringing them back to the concrete point of unity. So yeah, and that's our summary of this whole section. It's the reunification of these separate elements back into into a full unity, because none of them are separate.
Right.
This return and with this self-supporting subject, this process is the fructified earth, the universal individual, which completely at home in its moments, No longer has anything foreign to it, which, whether inner or outer, that's only completely realized moments. Its abstract moments are themselves the physical elements, and these are themselves processes. All right. We can finish up with 289 here. In the first place, the notion of matter gravity sets forth its moments are self-subsistent but elemental realities, and the earth therefore is only the abstract ground of individuality. In its process, the earth posits itself as the negative unity of these abstract, mutually external elements, and consequently as a real individuality. So I'm trying to think, this is the part where the thing that we're considering is itself different. It's considered itself different from its underlying moments. And so this it being negative, and that's is that where he's going with the negative sense of it? So
Well, it
the negation of negation kind of thing here.
yeah. So let me try to parse this language a little because I'm still
Yeah.
kind of working through it myself. So like, all right, so that we have notions of matter, gravity, and so forth, and they're set forth in the first place immediately as self-subsistent and elemental realities. And so that which sort of like gives them a setting is really just sort of this abstract blank playing field at first, right? The earth is just this abstract ground of individuality. Uh, and then he moves to the second sentence and says, in its process, the earth itself posits itself as the negative unity of these abstract mutually external elements. So the negative so the earth posited as a negative is a receptive field on which all of these elements are combined into its own individuality, and the earth changes from the previously abstract ground to an actual real individuality, which makes up the combination of all of those elements in process with itself. And so that new unity, that
Yes.
the, the
This is the emotion of its essence again. It's
yeah.
generating its own negative, which creates the unity, right?
Right, right. Whenever I see negative anymore, I almost think of the word receptive, because when say the earth is positive as a negative unity, I think of the earth as like if you play with Legos, right? And you make you how do I want to say this? Have you played Minecraft? So think of the opening map as the negative space on which the processes of building the houses or whatever you want to build on it, right? And so you combined the
Oh,
the negative, the earth as a negative, a receptive ground on which all of these things are
this is
placed, and then suddenly as a totality you have, a place that combines the moon, the comet, onto the abstract setting, which is the earth, and it suddenly turns into a meteorological.
it's ground in a more literal sense too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but also in the abstract sense. And you
Right.
really get the abstract sense of the ground from the first part, because you really, he posits all of the pieces before he puts them together like Legos. And you have the finished Lego Death Star, but before that you have all the elements, like the laser thing, and the superstructure and all of that stuff, right?
Oh, I just saw that, and I kind of want to figure that how this picture out too. Sorry to go back here. Yeah, this is a small zoos ad, so might as well. Through the selfhood by which the Earth proves itself to be real, it distinguishes itself from gravity. Whereas previously we had only matter simply determined as heavy, the qualities are now distinct from heavy matter. Heavy matter, that is, now stands in relation to the determinant as this is a new development.
Yeah.
Yeah, the selfhood of light, which was previously opposed heavy matter, is now the selfhood of matter itself. This infinite ideality is now the nature of matter itself. A relation of this ideality is thus posited to the torpid being within self of gravity. Being within self. The physical elements are thus no longer mere moments of a single subject, but are now pervaded by this principle of individuality, which is at the same time at each point of this physical existence. Okay, itself shows itself to be the material.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
okay. This last sentence
Mhm.
is to me really indicative of what he's trying to get across. So he says the physical elements are thus no longer mere moments of a single subject, but are now pervaded by this principle of individuality, which is the same at each point of this physical existence. So if you think of the capitalist system, right, and you think of the physical, well, you think of the different elements that make up the capitalist system. You really can't look at any one element in its separation as being what it is without also considering the whole of the capitalist system. And here he's
Right.
saying the same thing about the physical existence of the earth, right? These physical elements cannot be separated from it without becoming something that's not at all part of the process of the earth
Right.
as it generates them. Is what I should say.
Yeah, it's becomes a whole system, basically.
And we can see this by comparison when we talk about like water on Jupiter's moons. The water on Jupiter's moons, for example, we can think of them in analog, but we can't really characterize the water on Jupiter's moons as like ours, except chemically, and because they're governed by the process that's on Jupiter's moons as
Mhm.
opposed to governed by the processes that are on Earth. Like they'd be
Right.
totally alien. If you dropped like a gallon of the water from Jupiter's moons in our oceans right now, it would probably have an explosive effect not only on the wildlife in the ocean, for example, but also probably on the meteorological conditions. You know what I mean? It would be like setting off
Um,
it'd be setting off a nuke in the ocean.
it might be like, I don't know, maybe not at first, but like the whole butterfly effect.
Yeah,
It slowly built up, right?
yeah.
Um, yep.
Wow, that is fast. That's fascinating to think about how he's putting that together here because um it's easy. It's what once you get it, it's sort of like, oh, okay, I understand how it worked with like capital, but now looking at it with the natural processes, it's really quite something to look at.
What happens when you're anti-reductionist? You see the whole picture.
Yeah, it really is. Whole in the parts.
Yeah. And the sentence, of course, is the final lead up to what we're talking to next. Instead, therefore, of one universal individuality, we have the multiplication of individualities, each likewise possessing the total form. The earth separates itself
Yes.
into individualities, possessing the entire form in themselves. This constitutes a second sphere, which we now have to consider the particular individuality.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
this Zuzats is one of those is one of those descriptions that I really wish someone would take and like just start like mapping it onto things like capital to help explain it better because dealing with the whole and the parts is something analytic philosophy gets wrong, I think. When talking about capital, and that's pretty much at the heart of the problems with like Ben Burgess and Matt McManus and their worship of G.A. Cohen and just sort of like keeping everything separate and saying, well, the whole doesn't really exist. Well, if the whole doesn't really exist, what is it, pray tell, that is conditioning all of these elements that Marx talks about? This is why they run into problems, especially Ben Burgess talking about how value was the same in Aristotle's time as now. And I'm like, no, that's not what's happening, dumbass.
I
Okay.
just googled G.A. Cohen, and one of the second result I get is Jackman article on Ben Burgess on Cohen.
Yes, exactly. Oh yeah. He's been busy popularizing it. And he's been pushing his version of what Marx's capital is. And It's a sad day when he's taking the lead on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like
Analytic Marxists, you have the case of John Roma, who basically rejects most of what Marx had to say in Capital. He instead draws upon neoclassical economics and on game theory, and he tries to use those in order to justify some of Marx's conclusions, but the reasoning is different from what Marx relied on.
Yeah.
Because Rome was not, Rome basically rejects dialectics. And I think he also rejects the labor theory of value and things like that.
And of course, they reject them outright, not because they've read Capital and understand the logical necessity that Marx builds up, but because they have a preconception that they're trying to assert over and above what Marx does in his own book, which is just, I mean, it's not at all the same as providing a reading of Marx himself, but a revision. There's a reason we call these people revisionists. Yeah.
okay, but yeah, I don't know. Really, just kind of thinking back, it was really interesting, kind of going back through this, having studied meteorology, to actually be able to more clearly see the analogies he's making or the pictorial metaphors he's picking out of weather.
Yeah.
Again, we did mention the water cycle before we went into here, right? Which again, that's the change of liquid to air to solid, and of course, lightning is fire at that point.
Maybe a soda.
Okay,
That was awesome.
board, yeah. All right, so I think our next is probably going to be over physics of the particular individuality. It's which the intro plus okay, specific gravity. How far did this actually go? Well, sound is super big, so that's definitely going to be its own thing.
Yeah.
It has 4 sections. Not
So,
3.
yeah. So we've got the specific gravity, we've got cohesion.
We might be able to stop. Well, even going to cohesion is kind of long, but that
then
goes
we've
to
got
36.
sound.
Yeah, sound has got a huge use at.
Ah,
One,
well,
2, 3.
yeah, let's
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, like a 6-page Suzette on one of the, and then 3 on the others.
yeah. So let's read up to sound, which is page 136. So hang on, sorry. What is this?
Well,
124 to 136. So just 12 pages will be good. And then I mean sound is going to bring those two things together into a unity that we can talk about the next time after that.
well, this is one of those, like I said, rare sections that has 4 instead of 3 in it. So, kind of understand what heats means in this sense.
Yeah.
Shape, decomposition, chemical process. Maybe it's process at that point. Describing instead of just a unity, then maybe heat some sort of process. Cause I see that happening later on. All right, cool. That was fun. All right.
Absolutely. All right, comrades. Thanks so much, Kyle. That really helped me understand a lot of that. Um, I was gonna say someone really needs to like get to work and like go through and annotate freshly this book with today's science using, subject matter experts to be like, okay, this is the historical form, and this is what we know currently, and which, and ask the question like, which one matches up better with the logic that he pulls out or not, and just work on that.
I guess there's probably in the Soviet Union or in the Warsaw Pact countries, probably somebody has done that already, but may not be, be available in English. But
I would bet, Jim, you're absolutely right. Oh man, have more reading.
I think that's still up to like what 70s, 80s at newest. Some of that's still very modern. Some of that wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Although I'm trying to think. So for what part are we talking about that wouldn't be? I guess space time has gotten a little more nuanced in the past few years.
Yeah.
Because what was it? I'm listening to one podcast. I need to get into it. One is talking about again time being a complete illusion. The other one is talking about becoming being the one of the core principles. Like time is real and becoming is the core principle of physics. And I was like, that sounds interestingly related.
Yeah, it really does.
Because he's in physics, you're able to like something called even backcasting as well, where somehow the future kind of implies an effect on the past after it's already happened, but it may be a literal backwards in quantum world, or it may not be. It's still to be determined, but it believes time is real at least. Which, yeah, I'll throw that in chat. I still need to listen to it fully.
Yeah, please do. It's awesome. All right, comrades, I'm pretty tired, so I'm gonna get going. You guys have a great week, and I think I'm busy next Monday, so can we take a break this next Monday?
Okay.
All right. All right, great. I'll talk to you guys in the DMs and have a great